As 2023 came to a close and 2024 was just around the corner, it was a time when many people would be thinking about New Year's resolutions, developing new habits and becoming the best versions of themselves. We cannot go back in time and change the year that's just happened, and so many people use the new year as a time to set new goals, new challenges, and new habits they want to develop. I too wanted to do something similar, and so I decided that in the first month of the year, I wanted to try and read 10 books. Growing up, I used to read so many books, but somewhere along the line I stopped. I'm not quite sure why. And so I wanted to restart, and so I set myself the goal of 10 books in the month of January. Now unfortunately, I only managed to read 7, but I still think that's a decent amount. And I wasn't initially planning on making a video about this, but there was one book that really stood out in the month and I wanted to talk about. So out of all the books that I read last month, the one that I want to talk about and will recommend to everyone to read is The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. So Carlo Rovelli is an Italian theoretical physicist who has written many books and is also famously known for founding the theory of loop quantum gravity. In simple terms, it describes how space-time is made up of multiple finite loops. That explanation doesn't obviously do the theory justice. There's a lot more to it, but in very simple terms, that's what it means. So as the name suggests, this book is all about the concept of time. And what I find really interesting is that time is such a unique entity. If I were to ask you to define time, you'd probably say something along the lines of it's the passing of moments from the past to the future, or it's the transition of events from the past to the future, both of which are very valid definitions. But when we break down how time works, factors that influence it, we find that it's so complex. It's something so much more than just the passing of moments. And I think this book is incredible at describing all of these different things. So if we talk more about the book itself, the book is broken down into 3 parts. The first one describes kind of what is time, the different factors that influence time, and how time essentially works. Part 2 is about a world without time. What would happen if there was none? And then the final chapter is all about kind of why we use time, why we need time, and how the world wouldn't essentially work, or how our world, I should say, wouldn't work without it. Carlo Rovelli writes in a very poetic manner. I think this is super interesting, and it makes the book really unique because when we think of physics, and if we would think of poetry, they're 2 completely different worlds. But somehow the way that Carlo Rovelli writes, he manages to fuse the 2 to make it such a memorable book. So for example, to take a quote from the book, one which is, I think, incredibly beautiful, and like I said, it makes it so much nicer to read because you're merging physics with poetry, which is something not often done. So to read this quote, "This is time for us, memory, a nostalgia, the pain of absence. But it isn't absence that causes sorrow, it is affection and love. Without affection, without love, such absences would not cause us no pain. For this reason, even the pain caused by absence is in the end something good and even beautiful, because it feeds on that which gives meaning to life." I think that's really nice, especially because you wouldn't normally think to have that in a book about physics, about time. So the way that he writes is something really unique about this book, and one of the reasons why I highly recommend everyone to read it. And one thing I want to mention is that even if you don't have an interest in physics or time, I would highly recommend you still read this book, because it's not something that you'll need a background in physics to understand. You know, my background in physics is just, I did GCSE physics and after that I didn't study it anymore. And the way that Carlo Rovelli writes, it's incredibly easy for the layman to understand. He uses illustrations to make it easier, diagrams, and just the language that he uses. He doesn't use a lot of kind of what I would call jargon, like long words that only someone who's studied these kind of subjects will understand. He makes it very plain and simple, and he lays the facts out as they are. So even for the layman like myself, like potentially you, it's very easy to understand and to grasp the concepts very quickly. For example, one thing which I found quite amazing was that time is not universal. Time moves at different speeds depending on where one is. So for example, time moves faster at a higher altitude than at a lower one. So if you have two people, one of them lives up in the mountains, one of them lives right at sea level, the one in the mountains will age faster because time is moving faster, and the one who is at sea level will age slower. So for example, that was one of the concepts talked about at the very start of the book, and like I said, the way he writes it and describes it, uses diagrams, it's just so easy to understand. So even if you don't know much about physics, still give it a read because it's really, it's a very nice book. So I just want to finish this video by encouraging everyone to go read this book. I genuinely think it's my favourite book I read this month, and I read a lot of good books, some of which are up behind me now. That one's also a very good one. Astrophysics, People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson, would also recommend, but I think this book is far better. And I would highly recommend everyone to go read it, like I said. Thank you very much. This has been a very different video, and I want to do more of these videos because as I've started reading more, I want to share kind of books that I would highly recommend people to read. I feel like there are going to be a lot of books which just stand out, and I want to kind of express to as many people as possible and encourage as many people to read them because there's just something about them that is really good. So you might see more of these kind of book reviews, I guess. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I hope you guys go read the book. Goodbye.